This is life imitating art. There were no gowns like this that the Klansmen wore in the 1860s and 70s. This is a fictional invention, but it inspired the reincarnation of the Klan, and it did something new with the Klan. It took it from a southern organization of the ex-Confederacy to a national organization with chapters in every state, and the formation of an independent women's Klan. It was tired of male dominance and them telling them what to do in the Klan. So as women, they organized for white supremacy. Okay, so let's get down to business here. We got to talk about what fascism is before we go any further. As I said before, this is a distinct form of cultural politics. So, you know, in my sort of beckoning and reference here to Kubrick's How I Learned to Relax and Love the Bomb, Dr. Strangelove. Well, how I learned to relax and to drop F-bombs when we're talking about our present moment in time. So what is fascism? Why is this term so important? Why is this concept so key to understanding where we are? Fascism is an ultranationalist form of authoritarian politics that seeks, this is the key word, regeneration, rebirth. Make America great again, right? Second Klan, restore white supremacy and Christian chauvinism as the centerpiece of 100% Americanism, or another phrase the Second Klan used, this may sound familiar, America first. On their very banners, the same slogan as the MAGA movement. This is not hard to interpret, but people don't know it. And historical illiteracy is the best way to destroy your democracy. Because when you have a false myth of American history and you tell white people who've been on top forever that that history is being revised by left-wing lunatics who want to replace you, history becomes the battleground for democracy. The truth against lies. So what is fascism? It's regeneration of the nation. And by nation here, we're not polity. It's a national culture. Who belongs and who doesn't? Who belonged here in the American construction, pre-fascism, all the way from colonial up through the Civil War? White, native-born, not Christians, Protestants. Make that distinction. Catholics, of which I am one, have only recently been allowed in the club. Okay? Archbishop Dolan of New York gave the benediction at 2 Trump party nominations. It's lovely. Okay, so why do you need the regeneration? It's because the outliers among you, among the nation, have corrupted the culture. And just where to frame that today, corrupting our culture, non-Christian religion, the whole transgender manufactured controversy, revising American history to suit left-wing ideologues, all that stuff. The culture's been corrupted. The nation's been betrayed. Liberals, so-called, have led the nation into degeneration, weakness, and a national life that goes against all of its values and traditions. So it's the big betrayal. Stop the steal, orchestrated by black precinct workers. No, but that's the lie, right? Atlanta, Detroit. Why focus on those areas? Black majority cities known as sort of focal points of black culture, and who's obviously responsible and always has been for the degeneration of American culture, right? You put white supremacy on top and you subordinate black people and you outsource the scapegoats to them, all right? Stop the steal. Who else stole the election? Something that, that's enough truth telling. Who stole the election? A being that does not exist. Illegals. Especially on stolen land. Illegals. aliens. Okay? Two traditional scapegoats being resurrected from the white supremacist cemetery. Because we were all in the post-racial age, right, when Obama was elected. Remember that? Okay. Also remember gun sales going off the charts after Obama was elected, and the resurgence of paramilitary organization, the creation of new paramilitary organizations, and the proliferation of right-wing fascist talk radio and news. Direct reaction to it. Okay, so poisoning the blood of our people. Trump's used that phrase. That was a direct Nazi phrase. There's no difference. It's the same phrase. Poisoning the blood of our people. And what does that mean? It means the people are of European ancestry, they're Christian fundamentalists, and they were born here. Trump talks about genetics all the time, does he not?
I don't know a damn thing about it.
No, he doesn't. Genetics is just another way of saying master race. Okay, so we can't have immigrants in here because they're going to pollute the purity of our white ancestry, who's done nothing wrong ever and has only promoted freedom and virtue, as you all know. Okay, so dehumanization, poisoning the blood, right? Illegals, aliens, traitors, that's another phrase that these people use. Dehumanization. Alligator Alcatraz. Sending a paramilitary force of U.S. government personnel in Black Hawk helicopters to storm into a tenement building on the south side where mostly African Americans lived, hustling them out of their dwellings, naked and zip tying them. As Trump's putting memes out there with him flying an F-15, dumping shit on protesters. Declaring war on a major American city. Shapocalypse. Yep. Okay, so dehumanization. Those are some good examples. Historical falsification. Let's put portraits of Confederate generals up at West Point, as Secretary Hesgeth said, to honor our great Confederate heritage. What started the Second Klan? Rehabilitation of the First Klan's legacy. They're not nuanced about this, gang. They're not nuanced about it at all. And I'm sure as I'm saying this, you guys are thinking of lots of examples too. So, when we talk about this stuff, please bring your own examples up. All right, now here's the key too. This is at the center of it all. White Christian nationalism, all the way up to the 20th century, and then its evolution into fascism. It all depends upon political violence as the chief mobilizing catalyst. Insurrection is built into this worldview. January 6th is not an aberration except for disrupting the peaceful transition of power in our elections. January 6th is an old tradition deployed in a new format when fascist power has consolidated and does have the ability to overthrow the democracy. Mike Pence and the Capitol Police were all that stood between a dictatorial installation of Donald Trump and the tenuous survival of our democracy. If I don't get to it in the end, I want to say this now. This is why American fascism today is more dangerous than it's ever been. If you look at the Second Klan in the 1920s, chapters in all 48 states, women's independent organizations, 6 million members. That's 1 out of every 6 native-born white American Protestants. Okay? They never captured a political party. It was a bipartisan white supremacist movement, guys. And they never developed a cult of personality at the service of one charismatic leader. Now you do the math about the MAGA movement. It's captured one of the branches of, or it's captured one of the two political parties. It has this charismatic, buffoonish leader, and it has led to two sovereign co-equal branches of government, the judiciary and the legislative, to forfeit their constitutional power to be accumulated by Donald Trump. Something the founders could never have conceived of. It wasn't even a possible thing that a party would control the forfeiture of our constitutional rule of law. Forfeited, not taken, given away. And as anyone who studied political philosophy understands, you can't give away your natural rights because they're still in you. You're still born with them. It's impossible to existentially forfeit. And that's why fascism is really dehumanizing. It says, you don't need them. We'll take all the power. We'll take care of you. All right, conspiratorial thinking. There's a million of them out there. You know, you pick yours. First it was QAnon, and then it turned out MAGA really was the cabal. The stop the steal. Immigrants are taking your jobs. You know, you pick your conspiracy, right? It used to be that the Irish Catholics coming in the 1840s were going to install Rome rule and make everyone drink whiskey till they puked. Okay, right? I mean, you just substitute a new group in here for vilification. And the conspiracy, you know, the Catholic Romish conspiracy, the George Soros funded caravan of Latinas who are going to flood in here, turn everyone communist, and end American democracy and steal elections. All right, conspiratorial. Okay, I covered a lot of these points. Okay, fascism is essentially a culture, a political culture that can sometimes organize into a hierarchical political movement with great power. Think of how the Nazis arose, right? Street thugs beating up communists on the streets, beer hall push fails miserably. Hitler goes to prison, writes this big tract, and then they understand organizing a party is the best way to mobilize, but the best way to mobilize recruitment for the party is violence. All right. Okay. All right, so yeah, drop F-bombs. You know, I listen to Pod Save America sometimes, and you know, I can learn a lot from it, but when I heard Jon Favreau reduced to, he called it idiocy, worrying about whether or not this term applies, that shows you how the liberal establishment has no idea where we are in time. They are still hiding under the delusion that the two-party system is still in place and that we're actually going to have real elections in November. The regime does not go to two sites and take ballot boxes while trying to pass legislation that will deprive women of the right to vote, basically, married women, as well as various other forms of voter suppression, myriad forms they've been working on for decades through the American Legislative Executive Council, otherwise known as ALEC. Same group funding it all for the last 20 years. We are not where we used to be in terms of establishment politics. As flawed as they were, we still had some kind of functioning democracy. Inequitable according to class and race, of course, but it was there for our taking if we would have used it wisely. That democracy does not exist now. So we were born in innocence. Has anyone seen this portrait before?
Yes.
This is one of the most famous images in American history. Jack, why don't you tell us about it? You could tell us in 2014. Can you tell us?
It's Manifest Destiny.
It's Manifest Destiny. Okay, is there really a lady in a toga floating over the landscape? Of course not. This is allegory. Although Trump, if he saw this, probably would say, yeah, that's a great, you know, women used to lead. One aside about Trump and history. Does anyone know how Trump explained our victory in the American Revolution? He literally said this. I'm not kidding. Who said that?
I think he meant ports, but he did say airports.
He said airports. Don't give him the benefit of the doubt. You're a generous man. We took the airports. She's leading. Leading us into what? Well, you can see stage, I guess it would be right, the darkness of, quote, the wilderness, the untamed, savage continent, awaiting civilization, benevolently delivered by white, Christian, native-born folks. And so you see that Native Americans and Buffalo are pictured together. That these are not, the Indians aren't fully human. They're savages who must either assimilate, accept displacement, or be exterminated. And those are Thomas Jefferson's words, not mine.
Yeah, they've been calling us that.
Yep.
They've calling us that for years.
Yep. So, okay, so we see on the stage left side here, we see civilization making its progress. We see commerce in the river and the city in the background. We see the railroads coming and telegraphs. We see Jefferson's yeoman farmers carving out a homestead. And then we see the pioneers moving forward, taking civilization with them, the shock troops of civilization. So part of this whole thing is, with fascism, is you have to have a historical narrative that the nation is born in innocence with the mission of purification and divine ordination. So, well, how do I get back? There it is. So, everyone's favorite great communicator, Ronald Reagan. This is from a 1980 debate with, I think it was John Anderson, the Independent. He says, "I've always believed that this land was placed here between the two great oceans by some divine plan, that it was placed here to be found by a special kind of people who had a special love for freedom, and, hold on for it, we built a new breed of human." You can substitute white person. That's what Reagan means. We built a new breed of human called an American, a proud and independent and a most compassionate individual. So I cut out some parts of Reagan saying here, coming to America was all voluntary, and it only happened from Europe to America. It kind of leaves out millions. And why? Because fascists whitewash history, literally in America. You could just, with a wave of the Reagan rhetoric, erase the history of Native Americans subjected to genocide since the beginning. Genocide present at the creation of American colonialism. You can wave a magic wand and disappear the 4 million Americans who were wearing chains and reduce to non-personhood under the law through the legal category of, quote, Negro, which is the word for black in Spanish, but became, through an English borrowing, the designation of non-personhood and who can be enslaved or not. That's gone. And what else is gone? I'm just beginning to learn about this, the environmental destruction that accompanied westward expansion. There's a reason why the buffalo had to be rehabilitated when at one time they were the Great Plains, right? Okay, now, here's something called the violence of abstraction. This is what a lot of people in the MAGA movement learned in school. It's what a lot of us learned in school. But we paid attention because we knew there was more to the story than this violence of abstraction, where you can see continental expansion neatly carved up in color code, and instead of wars, you see what? Peace treaties, diplomatic agreements. From the Louisiana Purchase, Texas was just annexed, right? Waiting there for us to claim, right? Half of the Republic of Mexico taken by force in the Mexican War. To do what? Driven by the cotton slave power in Congress to expand the cotton kingdom. Because they couldn't get into Cuba and Nicaragua before the war, and that was the plan.
there's something else you forget too on that side.
What's that?
The Trail of Tears.
Yes.
How it started with my Choctaw tribe in 1831.
Oh, talk about the Choctaw.
1831,
Yep.
And ended with my Cherokee tribe in I think St. Kitts, in that area.
Yeah, I got you, exactly. So, I'm gonna go back to what I was gonna talk about before, but let's stay on this track here. See that map, or the map I had on? You could also just put this list up. Northwest Indian War, Ohio Country, Great Lakes area, 1785 to 94. Seminole War, start in the 1790s. There's supposed to be 3 of them. It's one long war that ends in 1858, 2 years before the Civil War. The Creek, or the Red Stick Wars, which the Choctaw are drawn into, as well as the Cherokee. That's in during the War of 1812, a little before and a little after. Tecumseh's Revolt, 1811, unites the Great Lakes and Ohio Country Indian nations in one giant revolt, which was arrived at in democratic deliberations by these Indian nations. So if you want to look for democracy in early America, before the age of Jackson, look at Tecumseh. The War of 1812, right? We fight the British, but that was really an Indian war that involved the Creek Wars, the Tecumseh Wars, and the Seminole War. I could go on and on and on, right? Black Hawk War, that should mean something to us here in Chicago and Illinois. Texas War, it's War of Independence, and then it's annexed. Talked about the Mexican War. Half our Mexican Republic was violently wrested away on a war based on a lie by President Polk that Mexico had crossed the border to attack us. It was the exact opposite. We crossed their border and they defended it. Only time a lie has ever been used to justify war in American history. Got that one taken care of. All right, you guys can read through these. We don't have time to go through all of them, but I'd be happy to talk about any of them in the Q&A. But here's one that we don't talk about much. Is the conquest of the Philippines. That came out of the Spanish-American War, where we liberated the Cubans from the Spanish Empire, passed an amendment. I think it was, I get Platt and Teller mixed up, but there was an amendment Congress passed before the war saying we have no interest in holding on to Cuba. It's not what this war is about. We're not going to do it. As soon as the war was over, there was another amendment passed, I think the Teller Amendment, which said, no, we're taking it. And within 5 years, 80% of the Cuban landmass was owned by American corporations. That, because we defeated the Spanish there, we got the consolation prize, we got the extra prize of the Philippines, where the concentration camp, there were 2 places it was invented in the late 19th, early 20th century. One was South Africa in the Boer War, the next one was the Philippine War, where the Americans destroyed in bloody genocidal fashion the Filipino resistance that was quoting the Declaration of Independence to assert its rights. Check out the history of the occupation of the Dominican Republic in Haiti in the early 20th century. The border wars with Pancho Villa and the Mexican Revolution, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. These are not sidelines of American history. It's the center.
Right.
It's the pivot. It's there. It's the foundation. American freedom, American slavery. It's an old book by Edmund Morgan of Yale, published in 1976. I'm not giving you guys new, historical conceptual breakthroughs here. But very few Americans can talk with detail about this history. So I just want to put something in relation, 2 things in relation to each other. And we can talk about this in the Q&A too. Every acre of the, quote, frontier, right, where you see settler colonialism expanding, is a site of genocidal destruction. And where was the frontier where was it contested in its bloodiest form?
New England. New England.
I think there's many good examples of that in the 17th century. And in fact, you're right, King Philip's War, in New England was the bloodiest per capita war in American history. But I'm going to look at a region this is more systematic on a wider scale and more directly tied to the development of American capitalism. At the heart of American capitalism, which is really saying the heart of American colonialism, in the South, in the plantation part of what will become the United States, every inch of that ground was being subjected to genocidal force to expand the plantation complex, which means expanding the racial slavery regime that is at the foundation of the history of American capitalism. Because in no other place was capital accumulated so rapidly in such a wide volume and with such systematic use of force to reinforce white supremacy in 3 ways. 1, accumulation of capital done by subjecting African Americans and Native Americans to different forms of destruction and exploitation. So, one thing to remember about America, this is key to it. If you're gonna remember something, remember this one. Every time there's an assertion, a surge of white supremacist violence in politics and organizing, it's in response to resistance, which is also at the center of American history. And if you want to make America great again, read that history. That's what we should have the monuments to. We have a great history. We're just looking at the wrong side of it. We have a great history. And here's another lesson. So these are a list of Indian revolts. Got the King Philip's War in there, okay? Here's the history of slave revolts. Now I have the Jamaican Maroons in here for a reason. It's because John Brown's revolt in 1859, John Brown religiously studied the Maroon movement in Jamaica, which was a series of slave revolts over 200 years where the successful rebels would go to the hinterland of Jamaica and create their own syncretic African societies to live free. John Brown wanted to create a free African society in the Appalachian Mountains. Okay, so this is an Atlantic history, it's all interconnected, but you can see here the long list of slave revolts. Big point, white supremacy worked for whites. It accomplished its mission, but it never, ever, ever in its history has it been secure, ever. What do you think explains the paranoia, the hypervigilance, the being armed to the teeth, the conspiracy theories? It's never secure because it's always been resisted. What does that tell you about our current moment? Where the hell did January 6th come from? In large part, it came from the BLM summer of 2020. Don't read what the Jan 6 rioters were saying. I'm sorry, insurrectionists. Okay, so here's what white supremacists are really afraid. How much time do we have? Like 15 minutes? Okay, well, we're not going to get to the end, but we can take some of the stuff in Q&A. All right, really quickly, colonial period, early national period, through the Civil War, and then after the Civil War. The 2 great threats to American greatness, Native Americans and African Americans, through resistance, and you see the fear in these engravings. Why did white supremacists in the MAGA movement fear Black Lives Matter so much? Why did they have to lie about it and say, cities were burnt down, violence and terrorism? Why did they thought this was the initiation of the apocalyptic script of racial genocidal warfare, white genocide. They see this when they look at a BLM demonstration. Think about the McCloskeys in St. Louis standing on their, these wealthy MAGA whites as a peaceful BLM march with kids in it, strollers. They're out there with their AR-15s, and they become icons of the MAGA movement. Icons. Kyle Rittenhouse goes to a BLM demonstration and murders people.
Yep.
Is a hero. What are they telling you?
With an illegally owned
Exactly. Yeah, there you go. Alex Pretty.
And his mother was responsible for bringing him out there.
That's right. Okay, so here's, Jay and I were talking before, you know, fascism is a kind of imperialism. And Hitler admired the genocide against Native Americans. It helped him understand his primary goal of Lebensraum, which, my terrible German accent, right? That means living space. Well, people were living there just like they were in the United States, but they're gonna be liquidated for the expansion of the master race. Sound familiar? That's why they studied us. Fascism was not, you know, in America, is not an imitation of the Nazis. It's a dialectical formation. One borrows from the other in
The
time.
German Nazis came to the South
Yes.
to research, and they thought the South took it too far.
Yes. Eugenics, yeah.
An example of the eugenics movement, what people don't realize is the paper genocide that's happening to our Native American people. And the person that's behind the eugenics movement, who started that one drop rule bullshit, was of course Walter Plecker. He was the one that started all of that. That's why today, if you go to the Virginia violent statistics, a lot of those black people that were labeled as or reclassified as black are actually full-blood, dark-skinned Native American Indians.
Right.
And that's been going on for thousands
Yeah.
of years.
No, the genocide is fundamental to the creation of the United States. And in the national period under the US, it was a colonial inheritance. It's at the center of American history. Okay, so we talked about the Great Replacement, right? So who's gonna replace the people, black rebels, Indian rebels, and now, starting in the mid-19th century, it was immigrants, particularly Catholic immigrants. And so new immigrant groups who are alien, they're here to replace us, et cetera, they get racialized. So here you have a very interesting depiction of an Irish immigrant. And there's a melding of Irish, anti-Irish and anti-black racism here. So I don't know if you can see the caption here, but it says the King of Ashanti, Irish Shanty, right? See the ridiculous crown he's wearing, you know, he's sitting on a wash tub. Well, Ashanti is an African ethnicity. Ashanti is an African ethnicity. It's the Akan people broken down into Fonte and Ashanti. And that is absolutely what this cartoonist is going for. Racializing the Irish to put them with African Americans at the bottom of the hierarchy. So here we have this ridiculous thing called phrenology, like your skull size and shape could determine your intelligence. It's a nice inheritance of Thomas Jefferson's scientific racism project that you could read all about in his notes on the state of Virginia. And here's all the stereotypes at once about the Irish, drunken brawlers who are here to destroy American democracy. Okay. So we have epics of white Christian nationalism that lay the foundation for the evolution of American fascism. And I'm gonna hurry up here just to cover things at least superficially. So Reconstruction after the Civil War, we have abolition of slavery, 14th Amendment due process, which is also gonna safeguard allegedly voting, and then that didn't work, so 15th Amendment, interracial democracy. The opposition to Reconstruction was the remobilization of the Confederate Army into paramilitary groups, labeled the Ku Klux Klan, the Knights of White Camellia, the White League, the Red League, the Red Shirts. That's what it is. There were slave patrols that became Confederate companies that remobilized after the war's Ku Klux Klan chapters. It's not an interpretation. They're saying it. But General Lee goes down in history as the benevolent Yoda-like figure who refuses to continue the Civil War in guerrilla fashion. Bullshit. He did. Here are all kinds of examples of insurrectionary violence in Reconstruction. This is Memphis in 1866, where scores of African Americans are gunned down and systematic rape was employed in black neighborhoods against black women. Here's the Colfax massacre. That is 1873 in Louisiana. It was an anti-black Democrat right massacre that killed over 300. We don't know because they threw them in rivers and dug mass graves. We don't know how many, but at least 300. Here's the, oops. Damn it.
That's good.
Okay. All right, so, yeah, let me finish up.
Oh, yeah, sure.
God, listen. Okay, this is the Opelousas massacre in, the one on the lower left here, in Louisiana. And here on the far right over here, this is the state capital of Louisiana at the time in New Orleans, the Mechanics Institute, the public building. This is the Republican Party, which was biracial at this time, trying to form a ticket for the 1866 election. And Confederate veterans simply got together, armed themselves, and with the help of the New Orleans police, stormed the building and tried to murder all of them. Second epic of white Christian nationalism, Jim Crow. So Reconstruction essentially is defeated in 1876. And so that paves the way for Jim Crow, which is an apartheid state despite the Natural Rights Declaration of Independence and all of the post-Civil War amendments. So how is Jim Crow enforced? Far left, lynching. Upwards of 3,800 African Americans lynched between 1880 and 1940, usually after being accused of violating a white woman. White women. These claims aren't imposed on white women, they're making them. Which should be no surprise, since 40% of enslaved people before the Civil War were owned by white women, who, according to the slaves, were crueler masters. Don't ask me, ask Stephanie Jones Rogers of Berkeley, who wrote a prize-winning book on the subject, correcting a bunch of white feminist dogma that white women couldn't be good slave masters because they were too virtuous and exercised a more moderating moral influence on the institution. Good God. So here's little Myrtle Vance, who, she was a white girl who was murdered. And train tables, tickets, fields cleared, stage built. This was a mass event, lynching. The whole community took part in it. Center, that's Wilmington, North Carolina, 1898. This is one of the last vestiges of Reconstruction still going in 1898. You have an integrated local government. You have black policemen. You have black people in the militia. You have integrated living. Well, one of the black newspapermen publishes an article saying the woman who becomes the first white senator, Rebecca Felton from Georgia, remarked on a lynching, if it takes 1,000 more of these to secure white womanhood and the virtue of Christian civilization, I say yes. She goes down in history as the first female senator. That's identity politics. And it sucks. It does. Rebecca Felton's a hero? So Wilmington, there's the pogrom there. And interracial democracy ends. This is St. Louis on the far right, 1917, one of the worst examples of insurrectionary racist violence in American history. Okay, I'm just gonna take 5 more minutes or so to talk, maybe a little bit more, and then we'll go to the Q&A, because I want to get some of this out here. Here's the link to how all this becomes fascism. Fascism is modernity. It seeks a regeneration of a glorious path and utilizes modern technology to do it. So how was the Klan reborn? Power of Hollywood. Taking a novel and making it into Birth of a Nation, and the message that the meaning of the Civil War is that white supremacy was maintained. And this faction of Southerners who went a little crazy, they get to come back. And interracial democracy and Reconstruction was a great mistake of radical left-wing lunatics who in the early 20th century, they were beginning to conflate racial justice with Bolshevik communism. And so you have this idea in the Second Klan that all what we would call woke, let's reclaim that. Everything that we would call woke is a communist, black, immigrant, Catholic plot to destroy masculinity, white supremacy, and Christian civilization. Movies, mass print culture, and other forms of modern associations we'll talk about. The Second Klan was literally a corporation founded by a white marketing male executive and a female white marketing executive who were at the top of their craft. This is a new business venture, marketing, right? Early 20th century. And then public relations. They delve into that. PR was invented to protect John D. Rockefeller from repercussions of the Ludlow, Colorado massacre of striking workers. So the Klan is formed through this new kind of business paradigm where public relations are really important. So it's a corporation. It's built on a corporate hierarchy of executives, and it utilizes a sales force paid in commission to go out and recruit members. And what they found out with the Grand Cyclopic Wizard Kleagle Clavern, whatever his name was, the title was, Dwight Stevenson, D.C. Stevenson, recognizes insurrection is the best way to mobilize the consciousness that's being stirred by all these forms of mass media. Get them involved. Not just the weird secret rituals and the marches. Get them involved. Klan culture, okay. So, American tradition, Klan baseball leagues. American tradition, county fairs, sponsored by the Klan. Picnics, religious services, civic gatherings. And there's that America First thing. Ladies leading the charge there. Shoot. Sorry, just bear with me with this, guys.
Sure.
Okay, what did I want to show you? Yes, I found this in my research at Emory University's Ku Klux Klan collection. And I wanted to show it because it freaked me out so much. Look at this, this is eerie. This is like horror movie. She's got that malevolent glint going. But she's got the modern bob haircut, right, the 1920s. But she's showing her traditional bona fides with the cross.
They're looking like a damn boat.
This was found at an estate sale in West Virginia, amongst a bunch of other like mundane stuff. This lady comes peering out from the past. So the ritual, that's that special sense of belonging. You'll hear a lot of MAGA people talk about, well, this, I found I could solve all my problems, become the real me by joining something bigger than me, right? Think of a Trump rally as a ritual. So the insurrectionary vector continues as white Christian nationalism becomes fascism. Fascism, all the things I described, but what it seeks the most is to make the state its first primary purpose is to protect and perpetuate the people's culture. Unifying culture and the state, they're inseparable, which is really interesting in a natural rights republic. So we see Chicago, in the upper left-hand corner, that's 1919. Tulsa on the bottom left and bottom right. There's Houston, And I think that's part of Washington, D.C., in the center there. And at the upper right is the Elaine, Arkansas massacre of 1919, when black sharecroppers were organizing into a branch of the Southern Tenant Farmers Union. 1919, Bolshevik Revolution, black workers organizing. You tell me what happens. So they wait till the crop's harvested. The black folks had harvested the crop, and then they kill about 300 of them, machine guns, aided by the United States Army, based on the lie that blacks were revolting and gonna kill all the white people. So they got the crop in, they did the massacre, and then they sold the crop that they stole from the black workers. And now, in Elaine, Arkansas, which was once, the early 20th century, where a lot of freed African Americans even owned their own land. That ended in this insurrection, which was attributed to the Bolshevik Revolution. One of the most important insurrections that's not talked about happened about a mile away from where I grew up in Pittsburgh, in the little industrial town of Carnegie. And the Klan's quarry at that one was Irishtown. This is in 1923. The Irish were labor organizers, they were Catholic, and they didn't ever back down. And they won this battle too. Just like the students at Notre Dame who beat the Klan in their own battle and earned the nickname the Fighting Irish. How many of you knew that's the story? It is. It's a great story. All right, so I think we should stop for questions. Okay, I think we can stop for questions now. I got a whole lot of stuff here on MAGA that we could talk about. So, Jay, you're handling questions.
Yeah, first, let's get a few questions out on the table and see where we're at back there. Jack?
Yeah.
And then you?
Well, first, this has really been informative. If you want to keep talking, I'm staying.
Okay, thanks.
But I do have a question. This is very informative, very interesting, a lot of dot connecting to make a dire picture. And we have an election in 200 and some days. So I want to go to the pragmatic. What do we do to stop
Wow.
this craziness?
Can you repeat that?
What do we do?
What do we do to stop this fascism?
Stop.
Is that, did I hear correctly?
No, but it's good the way you said it.
Stop
The craziness.
How do we
The
fight it?
crazy.
How do we fight it? How do we prevent our election from being stolen?
Okay,
Let's put them together, the fascist craziness.
okay,
Okay.
I'll take that. Put a couple questions on the table?
Yeah,
Thank you.
this is fascinating, and I'd like to see if you could, integrate the idea of the very wealthy from the very beginning, which were the plantation owners and large landowners, and they're very wealthy now, and how that dominance also runs through this thread, and how those relate.
Class
Really good.
interests.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And one back there, and then,
Going on with that, I was curious about how you think the current oligarchy with fascism, which is kind of intertwined, but then also the fact that previously oligarchy and fascism were intertwined because people weren't able to communicate with each other and see how the rough gap was materializing. And now we have that opportunity with social media and other things. So do you think that that is going to be significant in helping to stop said innovation?
Okay.
Could you repeat her
Okay.
comment
Okay,
at all?
That's enough right there
yeah.
for the questions.
Yeah, let's.
For now.
Let's
Okay, so.
play with these.
Right. So let's take class first. And then we'll talk about oligarchs and so forth. Okay. So, my friend said something profound. And it's hard to get to because it's so embedded in all of this madness. Is that capital formation is tied to all of this. Now, how, the question is then, let's take the American South. First and second Klan. Now, let's take it. These are the deepest pockets of poverty in America. Okay, just look at the stats for infant mortality, health, every indicator. So why do poor whites support this? Because in a capitalist class hierarchy, white supremacy is something that makes all whites equal, because they're all on top of the racially subordinated and terrorized and exploited. That sense of identity, of belonging to something greater than yourself, this has always been the case in the American labor movement. If anyone knows the history of the American labor movement, there are very promising bursts of interracial organization. But sooner or later, whether you're talking about the Knights of Labor or the AFL or the United Auto Workers, internal racist divisions inhibited the growing power of the labor movement. So what I'm trying to say is that the power structures through which white Christian nationalism and then fascism will thrive are based upon a capitalist organization of the economy. And you can't have a labor movement resisting that. You can't have active class consciousness resisting that. So you create the false pretense of white egalitarianism that has to be defended at all costs, because the subjugated are going to rise up and replace all. So I think that's kind of how it works. Bob Dylan's wrong in the Medgar Evers song. They're not pawns in the game, they buy into it. That's what my Irish did. They weren't white when they came here, they weren't black, but they were something else, and it was racialized. How do you fit in America? New York City draft riots, 1863. Irish Americans lynched dozens of African Americans because they didn't want to be drafted in the Civil War. They didn't want to be drafted in the Civil War to fight for white oligarchs, we'll say, so blacks could be free to steal their jobs. Okay, we're going to get to the what to do question in a second. So now we're talking about oligarchs, right? And then that was connected to media.
Yeah, just in the sense of fascism in this country, just really rides on exclusion and lack of
Good, yeah.
information.
Yes.
So therefore, in the fact that we are such a connected society,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that that is something that is helping prevent
Yeah.
capitalism, capitalize, so on and so forth?
It's the dialectic of technological innovation in modernity.
Yeah.
You can have Birth of a Nation. You can have Nick Fuentes on Instagram. But then you also have Refuse Fascism podcasts, right? And you have so many organizations and influencers mustering the power they have and building bases to oppose it. So it's not technology itself, obviously, it's how it's utilized. But let's take a step back and think about something inherently stupid, which I'm too often guilty of, which is arguing with people on social media about politics. Not smart. Started in the pandemic because I was bored. Got off Facebook, but please don't read my Instagram exchanges. It's dehumanizing, because all the crap that you would self-censor out of courtesy and politeness to someone as a human being, that evaporates. We're all in our little atomized places, and it's so much easier to tear someone down that way, especially if you're a racist. It's easy enough for people who are anti-racism to objectify the people that they're opposed to. So the technology is accomplishing, not just getting the message out of fascism, but it's accomplishing one of its greatest goals as an ancillary development, which is dehumanizing. Now, and who's orchestrating it all? Who's orchestrating it all? The master capital class, the oligarchs.
Yeah, oh my God.
That was really cool, the inauguration, wasn't it? To see them all sitting there. That was just, they're not shy about it. They are putting it in your face.
Financing the ballroom.
Oh, the
All
ballroom.
tech bros.
And all that gold gilt.
Yeah,
White House.
so.
Okay, what to do about it? Let's keep talking about that. First step is to join an organization and or devote yourself to some pursuit that is spreading the word and facilitating organization. And I would say to do that without the delusion that the midterm elections are going to determine up or down the fate of the MAGA movement. I hope I'm wrong. Historians shouldn't predict, but damn it, they're telling us. They're telling us. So one of the things we can do about it is have a plan B. The only way, I believe, this can be stopped is through mass organization and stepping out of the system to see it collapse. And that's a general strike. If you think the Democratic Party is going to come to your rescue, please pay attention. It's not. I'm going to write a strongly worded letter to the president. Come on, man. It's not going to happen. So what we need to do, I think, is see the moment clearly for what it is. Understand that this just isn't a lunatic, buffoon, vulgarian trying to be an authoritarian. He's got an entire movement behind him, captured a political party, 2 branches of government. He's got the weight of American history in its most dysfunctional aspects. Driving. First step, wake up. Second step, do something. Organize, do some activity, help mobilize, and then put your ass on the line. There's no other way to do it. There's no risk-free resistance. It's time to recognize what's going on. And if you're not going to put your ass on the line, we will lose.
Well,
We will lose.
fascism is a different form of rule. It rules by a different form of rule. We still are in the same economic system, but fascism rules by force. That's the whole history refers tonight. Not by the rule of law, which is being destroyed every day. Every day you read a new one. And particularly when it comes to elections, that's a whole, you can write a book about what they've already done, right? It rules by force. It doesn't rule by popular support. They don't depend on popular support. They don't care that their poll numbers are down because they don't plan on winning an election. And all the people who go crazy, oh, we're winning because their poll numbers are down. That's not how they're going to stay in power.
No.
They are going to stay in power by rigging the election, by trying to overturn the results. They're putting their people into different state levels to take over their electoral college votes. As John was saying, there's a whole pattern that they've been working on, a whole plan that they've been working on for decades. Yeah. And now having taken over the Republican Party, lock, stock, and barrel, and round 2, they are gearing up. And I think January, what do you call a failed coup attempt? A rehearsal. And they are putting it in place right now. Like I say, going to Fulton County and taking all of these, the voting records, the election results from 2020, and they're investigating in Arizona. They are, I think, to rely on those elections is denial. It's denial in the face of fascism. That is what fascism is. And we could get into the whole history of the economics of it. You know, we've talked about why was Reconstruction terminated. There's a whole empire depended on the super exploitation of black labor. There's a great book called The Empire of Cotton. You know what? I think it's 1965. That's where American democracy actually started. It didn't start till 1965. And you know, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, I think what was it? His approval rating 35% or something.
Oh, yeah.
He was considered a Bolshevik. And those forces have never reconciled themselves to what the 60s were. And none of this, what accomplished in the 60s, whether it was a black civil rights, black liberation, the Freedom Riders, women's liberation, Native American AIM movement, none of that was elected.
Mm.
None of it was elected. It came from the people, and that's what's gonna have to stop this fascism.
I got a
I'm-
question.
I'm
for you.
Yeah.
Can I just,
Yeah, I want to
A
say.
rejoinder and then 3 more.
yeah, I need it simple. So I got the wake up part.
Yeah. Okay.
Put your ass on the line. I'm not sure what that means in general strike.
It means protest
Yeah.
and be willing to commit acts of nonviolent civil disobedience. And that's scary.
Yeah.
That's really scary, because you're gonna end up in jail.
How do we do that?
We
that was
called, on
exactly my
November
question.
5th,
What-
we called for people to come to Washington DC en masse and not leave. Civil disobedience, civil resistance, shut shit down, call it what you will, the Occupy movement, people saw some relationship to there, and make it ungovernable in a non-violent way. That's what we were about. And we didn't succeed. Not enough people understood the danger that we are facing. Not enough people were willing to take those risks. Now we have No King's Day coming up. Is that gonna be a fun family outing, a big picnic? Or is it gonna be an expression of real determination? Stop the war on Iran, which we didn't even get to that. I mean, how friggin' dangerous that is.
Yep.
There was just this morning, some flunky of the regime was talking about private talks with Israel, where Israel is considering using a nuke against Iran.
Oh,
This was in the news today, okay? This was in the New York Times. And Trump must go now. Not just mass resistance. I don't care if you call it a general strike, or we're all heading to DC on July 4th, or whatever. But what is your demand? What is the demand of No Kings?
clarify your demand, yeah, that's
The
huge.
demand has to be the end of this fascist regime. This is the time, I'll tell you, this is the time where we might have a chance. If we think that the Democrats are gonna save us in November, our chance could be gone.
They can't even
I'll
call it
just-
fascism.
I'll just say,
They won't do it because they're afraid of the optics and the
Right.
blowback.
well, they're afraid of the unrest.
You're right.
They're
That's true.
afraid, they're more worried about this, maintaining the status quo than stopping this
That's a good point.
white supremacist juggernaut that John described.
Okay, here's our,
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
1,
in
2,
green.
3. Oh, no.
she was second.
One,
Yeah,
1,
I
2, 3.
basically had the same question that he did, but I don't think you're answering it, because
Okay.
how many people that have, families to support, have jobs to do, are able to just go on strike? What, what are they gonna live on?
That's the strike.
We'll get to it.
So,
Yeah, no,
Right.
these are
Look,
great, these
this-
are essential questions.
Yeah.
yeah.
Another
And
question
what
here
are
and
we
then
to
a
do?
question there. You had your hand up, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the person, right behind you, Jack, and then we'll get to you.
Yeah, this young man had his hand
Yeah.
up.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, I didn't
wanted to
see you
ask
behind
about,
there.
The MAGA movement and how that kind of,
Could you speak up a little bit?
I wanted to ask about the MAGA movement and how it contributes to it, because I've noticed a lot of, medical misinformation, specifically targeted towards women, and also like people in lower, classes, and I think that's very important for understanding.
Yeah.
The Make America Healthy Again movement.
The
and-
RFK
Yeah,
stuff.
misinformation, and how does that factor in here? And you
Well,
had-
so what's his approval rating right now? Like 30%?
No, well, among Republicans, it's
Okay, but let's
80 to
just-
90.
Let's just say a third of the country,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
right? And let's also say that we do defeat fascism, because we must. What do we do with those 30%?
Okay, great question,
Good.
great
Very
question.
good question.
And then,
Then we had the
I said
practical.
something before, but I really wanna say this is important. It works. It's what brought down Milosevic.
Mhm.
Gene Sharp helped
Mhm.
organize that. It's what brought down Marcos.
Mhm.
So it does
People power.
work.
That's
yeah,
right.
and Khrushchenko, I think, in the Ukraine, I can't remember his name.
Mubarak,
Yep.
Bulgaria.
Bulgaria, just in December.
Ceausescu, I
Well,
mean, yeah.
Ceausescu was a little less calm than.
Yeah.
Yeah, but twice in South Korea, they've done exactly
Okay,
what
so
we're
let's
talking
take
about.
these and then,
Uh,
let's take these now.
Okay.
Okay, because
Okay,
there's a
then we'll
couple.
call 'em.
So we got Maha.
And how do
Definitely
you
not
do
an
this?
expert on this. I'd love other people to weigh in. But what I see MAGA as it relates to fascism is questioning science if it's not deployed in the interest of the regime. It's a fascist model of disinformation, confusion, and basically calling something toxic and lethal virtuous and of value. Yeah, so I don't know exactly. Oh, but then I think you mentioned it yourself. It's patriarchy. So do your research for 5 minutes on your iPhone when you're, let's say, indisposed, and then you become an expert on every subject imaginable. You can mistrust the elites who've been lying to you forever, and the elites do lie to you. But we also have science as a way to check what the lies are about. But we can dismiss all of that because God gave us noses and lungs, and we don't have to wear masks during COVID, right? Okay, so there's that. I hope I approached something there for you. And then
Bleach will care. Bleach will fix it.
Bleach, right? Yeah. And then the follow-up about answering the essential question, sir. And you posed it right off the bat, which is a great place to go after this talk. That's where it should be going. So I don't have the answer exactly, because if I did, right? But what I know we have to do is join. Get active. Join a group. Become an influencer. Attend a workshop. Bring other people along. These are the everyday building blocks of resistance. You can't build a movement on a unstable foundation or a weak one. And as you're doing all these, you're obviously waking up. Educate yourself. There's all kinds of great anti-fascist literature out there, from Bray's book about the history of Antifa to the writings of Jason Stanley, for example. And then you can talk to people and educate them. Go back and read your history.
But we're all talking to each other. We're all preaching to, I go to all these kinds of meetings and read all this stuff.
Yeah.
And we all agree that things are shit and that fascism is growing. But I don't hear any practical actions. I mean, I go to all the demonstrations with my signs and all that, but and all Evanston people.
Yeah,
all
I have an answer to
great.
that. I'm trying to make clear that. What?
Well, it's not true that
Well,
we all
hold
agree.
on. I just my response is what you questioned, and this is the problem. And I mean this constructively. You said, well, what about the people who have jobs and can't? Yes. How did the civil rights movement function in the 1950s? Boycotts. When African Americans in the South, who were already facing paramilitary terrorism, refused to take segregated transportation to work. That was the express route to getting fired when you already had, when you barely had anything at all, let alone your civil rights. So let me finish. This is a cold, hard truth. And
What's the analogy for us to do rather than to sit in or not take the bus? What's the current analogy?
Go ahead.
For instance, people power in the Philippines, analogous to what you're talking about.
Right, but what is, how
People,
does that relate to
okay, let me finish. The whole families work together. I have okay, doesn't matter where I got the information, but whole families work together where, okay, these nights of the week, all the kids are gonna be watched by this aunt, and so that the other people can be out there. And one of the ways that they blocked things up in Manila, that was the final straw, was they literally took their cars out, and they were organized to strategically block off the main arteries of traffic, the main government areas, and they just shut it down. How did they do that? These were people who were much poorer, much more lacking in resources than most of the people in this country, let alone us, okay? They did it because they were determined they were not gonna put up with Marcos' dictatorship one day longer. And they found the resources with people power. That name is very
The people in
Descriptive.
Minneapolis are an example. They deserve
Another
to be
example, that's right.
Great example.
That's right,
100%.
exactly,
That's a great example.
exactly.
This,
Aaron.
Aaron.
I have both very optimistic and very cynical views about all of this. One thing I'm thinking is that you just pointed to something when you said people had, essentially what you were saying is that they had nothing to lose. And I think the comforts that we have
Yeah.
are very
Great
difficult
point,
to let
great
go of.
point.
I mean,
Yep.
a couple years ago,
Yes.
I can't remember, some influencer was calling for a general strike, and I, in my fervor and optimism, called my boss and said, I'm not coming to work tomorrow, I'm joining the general strike. He was like, what the hell general strike are you talking about? It's like, 5 people on Instagram, but I did it. And he said to me, okay, well then I'm gonna dock your pay for tomorrow, in the spirit of what you're doing. And it irked me, but I sort of appreciated it, because he was like, well, if you want to experience this, then why don't you really experience it, you know?
Right.
But, I felt it, and
Yeah.
I felt what that would be like, and
Yeah.
so, I just think we're gonna have to get a lot more uncomfortable, and it's gonna have to be a lot
Yeah.
more.
Well, it's already gonna get uncomfortable with $5, $6, $7 a gallon gas.
Yeah, that's a good way to.
Exactly.
But I appreciate what you're
It's
saying so
exactly
much
right.
about class basis of resistance and how far the resistance goes.
That's right.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
One other thing I wanted to say, which you spoke to, is what are we gonna do with those 30%? And it comes
That's
from
right, sorry, Jim.
hearing your talk, and the fact that fascism has only gone underground during periods of
Right.
seeming reconstruction
Yes.
and whatever else. It speaks to this other part of me that just thinks that we all have to transform ourselves within, because we're not gonna just throw a third of the country in jail or suppress them in our own way, So that's a big part of what I wonder about is, how, and so then what it leads me to, and to that question too, is like, it has to be happening in conversation, And there's some really hopeful part of me that thinks that when I did what I did at work, my boss, some little needle moved, like a
Exactly
little
right.
nanometer.
Exactly right.
And you gotta be having like a bajillion conversations with people,
That's right.
moving that needle little at a time, so that people show up in a way. And then the last thing I wanna say is, you said clarify your demand. I wanna know who's listening. The demand to whom?
That's
Like,
right.
Cause it feels
That's
when
a-
you show up at protests like you're
Right.
in an echo chamber,
Yeah.
And Donald Trump doesn't care what we're saying, neither
Right.
does the media,
Very good question.
So, sorry to
That's
go
And the
exactly right.
Democratic Party.
No,
Okay.
could I just say, I think in a way you answered yourself.
Yeah.
About that people's relative comfort have to change. And that's part of what we're doing. Because it is bad in some senses, but the more we fail to face the severity of the crisis, that this really is a different form of rule that is being set up right brick by brick by brick, and that it's gonna bury us if we don't break out of it soon. It is not a pendulum swing. This is a different form of rule. And if we don't, that understanding and this conversation is what's going to move us. If I could, I think the 60s/70s have some lessons for us about that. Where, I can speak for myself. I came from a white, working class, well-off, very segregated neighborhood. Serious. I knew guys in high school that lit a cross on a black family's lawn when they moved into the neighborhood. That's how bad it was. It all transformed in the 60s when guys went to Vietnam and came back hating America and what happened, and for the first time we're in the trenches with black people, and black people stood up. It was the uprising of the people that changed, not just the people who did it, but a lot of people who now, they would have been MAGA today. I'm just saying, people are not static, just like you moving the needle with your boss. And May Day is coming up. But maybe, Paul, you could speak to who are we talking to with this demand? Trump must go now?
Okay, yeah, I'll say a few things. My name's Paul, I'm with Refuse Fascism, National Board, and I really want to second Jay's notion, and I'm hearing also from this group here, that there's nothing mysterious about what's involved in general authoritarian regimes. It has been done again and again and
sometimes, well, this is America and people don't do that, they don't coalesce that way, it's kind of an American exceptionalism argument. We're so individualistic. Well, guess what? American exceptionalism was supposed to have precluded the rise and potential consolidation of a fascist regime. And that has now happened here. So now it's time to not just give them American exceptionalism, right? And let them reject it. We must reject it too. And we can do that. We have two key slogans that refuse fascism. And I know that people that didn't refuse fascism here can say it with me. The first one is, in the name of humanity,
we refuse to accept a fascist America.
The other one is, Trump
Must go now.
Sometimes we say the Trump regime must go now, because people say, well, Trump goes and then there's still the regime. You're right, so I like to say the regime. I think we need to add now, end the Iran war now. This maniac said he's gonna bomb a nuclear power plant in Iran within 48 hours of 24 hours ago or whatever. So there's all of that. We are going to gather on No King's Day at, tell me if I got this right, Jay, Columbus?
No.
And Jackson and what?
Michigan.
Michigan.
Oh, we're gathering in Michigan. Michigan and Jackson. We will be brandishing these slogans. We will have the best artwork that anyone ever brings, the coolest posters that anyone ever brings to No King's Day. But we want to project a different kind of energy, I think, that's fair to say, than rallying and letting off steam every 4.5 months. We are talking about sustained, nonviolent, day-to-day mass resistance, day after day. When you look at what these people powers movements have done to bring down authoritarian regimes, it's all the time. I want to make a couple medical announcements, believe it or not. One of them is, I've heard people say, well, why are you talking about fascism? We're still free to demonstrate and protest, and they don't line us up against the wall and shoot. They don't make
exactly.
all this, and I think to myself, so you're saying we can't say it's fascism until it's too late to fight fascism? My medical analogy is like telling someone they don't have a real serious tumor in their throat until they can't breathe or speak.
Right.
Now, my other medical analogy has to do with what is to be done, and it's the heart attack analogy. Telling people to rely on likely, we already know, rigged, probably rejected elections, but telling people to rely on the elections to fight fascism, to me, is like telling someone in the middle of a heart attack to take two, this thing is moving very quickly. Every day there's another strike. To me, it's like telling people to, in the middle of a heart attack, to take 2 aspirin and make sure to go see your, have your regularly scheduled checkup with your really not very good doctor who themselves is very sick and may be dead anyway in November of 26 or November of 28, okay? When we say Trump must go now, we put an emphasis on now. And I remember when we decided we had to make it, we were going Trump must go, and go, now, right away. There's too much happening, too fast. I mean, you could just eat the war on science, the war on black history, the war on education, the war on livable ecology, the war on Iran.
Women.
It just goes on and on and on. It's moving too quickly. And the war on science. I mean, you could go in for 5 minutes about how many things they're waging war on. So we do never say don't vote. That's I'm not aware of anyone who is fashion never says don't vote. And we are open to everyone and anyone who wants to see this regime gone. From revolutionary communists on the left, through liberal centrist Democrats in the center, to progressive Bernie kind of Democrats.
Never Trumpers.
Hell, even to never Trumper Republicans. There's a bunch of Republicans that are pissed off. You know, I'll even, some of these about the Iran war. Well, we got some serious issues. You want Trump going now? Let's go. But so, Columbus and Michigan.
Can I say one thing?
No,
Jackson.
They run parallel.
Columbus and Jackson.
Let me just add on real quick. No, Michigan and Jackson. The revolution begins now. Look, one thing, when someone says, we're still free, we're gonna have elections, they're not lining us up against the wall and shooting us, they are executing us.
Yes.
Yes.
There's your answer for that.
Narrowed it down.
Sir?
Have you given up on populism? It sounds to me like you're a little bit more skewed towards kind of a revolutionary mindset, and I understand what you're saying about the Democrats and the Republicans, the neocons, the neoliberals.
Yeah.
Nothing changes. From my viewpoint, when Trump came down, they say down the escalator in 2016,
Yeah.
he had a populist message that, people voted for him. He won 2 elections. I personally think he won the 2020, because I remember watching the video.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, so there were some independents and some populists and people who wanted the deep state gone, wanted to fight all the corruption, all the term limits. I mean, there were, people, like they said, Occupy and Tea Party, the same populist viewpoint back a decade or 2 ago. I mean, the MAGA movement is splintered right now, and I don't see, Trump, I mean, he's not delivering on anything that he promised his voter base.
Yeah.
So do you see any populist
Yeah.
combining or something, or do you think
Yeah.
it's a pie in the sky